Minarapat po namin na talakayin itong executive privilege ngayong umaga. Bunsod na rin kasi na yun ang laging naririnig ng ating mga kababayan ngayong mga panahon na ito. Bunsod nung hearing na isinasagawa po ng Senate Foreign Relations Committee ni Senator Amy Marcos. At naging mainit na usapin ito because yung ating mga opisyales po ng pamahalaan ay they have been invoking executive privilege. Pero sa pagkakaintindi natin, bukas ay dahil namagitan si Senate President Cheese Escudero ay pumayag na rin, no? Bumaliktad yung mga palasyo at sinabing papayagan ang kanilang cabinet officials to attend. But meron din daw mga hindi matatalakay at hindi masasagot because they are going to invoke executive privilege. Let's talk about that para ito po ay mapaliwanag natin in simple terms. Let's break it down para lalo pong maintindihan ng ating mga kababayan. Ano po ba ang executive privilege?
Okay, unang-una, pag nagpatawag ng Senado ng mga witnesses or resource persons sa mga hearing in aid of legislation, ito ay hindi pwedeng tanggihan ng sino mang natawag. So, a person who has been summoned must appear. However, when a person who is connected with the executive branch of government invokes executive privilege and the committee that is investigating or conducting the hearing recognizes that the matter is a matter of executive privilege, ito ay hindi pwedeng tanungin. So ang susunod na sasagutin ko kung ano ang executive privilege. Ito ay nauukol sa mga bagay na kinakailangan ng Pangulong malaman at nang magamparan niya ang mga tungkulin niya bilang isang Pangulo. Example of executive privilege, matters having to do with planning national defense. So anong gagawin natin, anong strategiya na gagamitin ng Navy or National Defense or Army at nang mabantayan nila ang karagatan natin at anuman ang mga interest natin sa West Philippine Sea. Another, the conduct of foreign relations. Paano tayo magipag-ugnayan sa mga iba't ibang bansa? Anong terms of reference natin? Anong hihilingin natin? Anong pwede nating i-offer? So yung mga bagay-bagay na yan are matters related to the exercise by the President of his office as Chief Executive at hindi ito pwedeng banggitin o tanungin sa anumang hearing kasi the functioning of the office of the President would be prejudiced or disadvantaged by such disclosures.
Okay. So, Dean, tama ho ba yung pinahayag po ni Senator Amy na hindi nga blanket itong executive privilege? And she even went as far as requesting already for a subpoena, and Senate President Cheese said na he will intermediate because nga there might be a constitutional crisis had the subpoena been served. Was this correct on the part of the Senate na Senate President Cheese nag-mediate, tapos si Senator Amy naman ay she was going to summon them with a subpoena? Kasi nga sabi nga niya, hindi naman blanket itong executive privilege. Only for some parts, no? Like you mentioned nga, national defense and foreign relations.
Yes. By the way, the aspects of executive privilege I mentioned are not exclusive.
Okay.
There are others. For example, the conduct of monetary relations, anything that has to do with delicate decisions that the President makes as executive privilege. Now, tama yung sinabi ni Amy Marcos that executive privilege is not a blanket excuse. On the other hand, the Senate President was correct in mediating because he recognizes that there are in fact matters of executive privilege that cannot and should not be asked during a Senate hearing. Ngayon, kung ipilit ng Senado na tanungin sa mga witnesses or resource persons ang matters na nauukol sa executive privilege, they can always go to the Supreme Court and ask for injunction.
Alam, naulinigan ko naman din si Senate President Cheese Escudero. Sabi niya, he was cautioning actually the Congress, the Senate, no? Sabi niya, let's be careful na the matter will be brought again to the Supreme Court because nakita naman natin, and we will ask you to explain. He was saying, nagkaroon na ng mga decided cases ang Korte Suprema, Neri versus Senate at saka yung Ermita versus Senate, kung saan the Supreme Court laid down some decisions, no, rulings na ngayon ay legal precedents po, na parang, according to him, ginapos ang Kongreso. Sabi niya, mag-ingat tayo that the matter will be brought again to the Supreme Court. Baka lalong lumiit yung saklaw ng Senado, ng maari nating talakayan kaugnay po ng pag-invoke ng executive ng executive privilege. Tama po ba si Senate President doon?
Yes. In those cases that you mentioned, the Supreme Court distinguished between hearings in aid of legislation where attendance is compulsory and the only excuse is executive privilege, and the other kind of hearing is the so-called question hour when members of the executive branch, either on their own initiative or upon invitation of the houses of Congress, appear before Congress or its committees with the permission of the President so that Congress may inquire into the discharge of executive functions. Pero itong pinag-uusapan natin, mukhang ang ginagamit nila ay hearing in aid of legislation. Kaya ang tanging paraan na hindi sasagot yung mga testigo na natawagan ay executive privilege. Kaya pinag-uusapan ngayon ang executive privilege. And as I told you, executive privilege can be invoked by the office of the President in regard to those matters which, if disclosed, would constitute an impediment or prejudice or would prejudice the actions of the President.
Parang kasi, if I may, Pati,
go ahead.
yung merong binabanggit kasi yung communications ng Pangulo with yung cabinet niya, for example, ay hindi yun ay protected, no, kasi nga ang logic doon kailangan maging candid ang pangulo, no, doon sa yung mga rekomendasyon sa kanya, payo sa kanya, yung kasi isa yun sa pinunto di ba, yung pagpaplano po nung itong pag-aresto kay former President Rodrigo Duterte. So I remember that na naging mainit na topic yun, and I'm wondering kung saklaw ng executive privilege na ayaw nilang i-disclose what was discussed nung, supposedly sabi ni Secretary Remulla, John Vic, na parang apat silang nag-uusap. And he did not want to discuss the details of the conversation with the President.
That's correct. Matters like that have to do with the discharge directly by the President of the functions of his office. Ngayon, kung lahat ng communications between the President and his advisors or his ministers or his cabinet secretaries could be disclosed in a hearing, they would always be hesitant to make statements which later on may become troublesome in a congressional hearing. That's why executive privilege is correctly invoked.
Let's get together. Sa NET25. Sa NET25.